I think as women, we are so socialized to never ask that question, right? From day one, we are told to be good, we are told to be quiet, not take up space, don't be too bossy, don't be too controlling, all of those things. And, you get to adulthood and you've heard that for so long. I think so many women have just completely turned off access to what it is they want. Like, I used to have trouble saying what I wanted for dinner, let alone what I want out of my life. And it feels so big and impossible. You almost have to start exercising that want muscle to be able to access those bigger questions.
Hello, everyone. This is Samantha Saxby with another episode of Moms with Benefits. And today our guest is Dr. Ann Welsh. And we are super honored to have Dr. Ann today with us. She is a clinical psychologist. She is a consultant. She is an executive coach. She is a fair play facilitator, if anybody's read that book. And she really specializes in supporting women in their transition to parenthood. But specifically, she specializes on the STEM, law, and healthcare niches. So we are so excited to have you today on the Moms with Benefits podcast. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so today I'm actually super excited about this topic. We're going to talk about the ambitious identity paradox. And so if you consider yourself an ambitious person, an ambitious mom that's listening that may be struggling with how the heck to make it happen when you are trying to balance, quote unquote, balance family and work, I think this episode is going to be really powerful for you. So I'm very excited. So I want to start out with a question that's just really broad, but I'm very interested to hear your take on it. So why is being a working parent so hard?
I think just on a very superficial level, logistically, it is really challenging, right? Like, think about what happens before you leave your house for the day, right? Like, everyone has their own schedule. I wake up at 5 in the morning. By the time I start work at 8 in the morning, I have already done 3 hours of work. It's just, there's so many pieces that you have to do in a given day. And that's just the logistics element of it. But you're also doing a lot of emotional labor to get through all of that. I think if we zoom out, though, things are hard because essentially when you transition into being a working parent, you're going through 2 transitions simultaneously. So you have a kid, and that's this kind of earth-shattering, massive transition. Your identity gets turned on its head. You don't even really realize how big it is until you're a ways into it. And then you go back to work. And maybe that's 6 weeks later, maybe that's 6 months later, maybe that's 6 years later, maybe you take a long pause, but at whatever point that happens, there's a whole nother transition from working person to working parent. And that is also really challenging. So you're kind of doing these multiple identity shifts almost simultaneously, and it is a lot. It's a lot for your kind of brain to wrap its head around. Again, it's a lot from those logistics standpoint. And there's a lot of biological changes that are happening through this period too that you're adjusting to. And some of them are really enriching your brain, which we don't always talk about. But regardless, it's change. And even good change is really hard.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it's interesting. My mind went to processing change. And if you have so much logistically happening, so much emotional labor happening, when is the time for you as, your unique identity soul person, allowed to or given that space to kind of process the change of kind of who you are now and what your responsibilities are and things like that. Do you have any kind of comments around processing change?
I think that's such a big point, right? I mean, I think if we just think about it from a work perspective, we understand that if you're in the doing of the task, you can't really be simultaneously doing the strategic thinking that you need to be doing, right? Like if you're someone that is high up in your organization, you can't be like on the line working and making the managerial decisions. We know that that does not work, but that's essentially what we're asking working parents to do. Like learn all the elements of the job, do all the things. Oh yeah, and somehow reflect on the enormity of what is happening to you simultaneously. And it's kind of an impossible task. When I work with people individual, that is often a lot of what we are doing, is doing that kind of more strategic thinking, if you will, of reflecting on what is changing. What do I want now with this new situation? What parts of myself am I letting go of? What parts do I want to hold on to and bring into the forefront? And how does that then look moving forward? I mean, I was just talking to a client the other day, and she was kind of talking about, do I take on this new big project or not? It feels like it's going to be like logistically challenging. And we were in a group, and group members started offering some logistic advice, and I said, well, let's pause for a second. Do you actually want to take this on, right? Before we get into the logistics, we have to have that space of, do I want this? And you don't always have that space and bandwidth as a working parent because you're trying to do so many things.
Yeah, that it's an interesting concept. I'm trying to, like, from my perspective, it's like I have these goals and I don't want these goals to get derailed. It has like a negative connotation, but derailed because of kids. But at the same time, being a mom is, I believe, one of the most important jobs out there too. And so it's like, how do you assess what you want to do and then what is logistically feasible? So separating those out, it feels like that's an important part of the process, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because if you have a why and a want, we can usually figure out the logistics. But I think a lot of times what happens, and this is what the ambitious identity paradox is all about, is that we're chasing after the wrong things because we think we want them, or much more often because everybody else says we're supposed to want them. So, essentially, the ideal mom and the ideal worker both are kind of built on the altar of self-sacrifice, if you will, right? To be the, quote, perfect mom from a cultural narrative is to be a martyr, to put everyone else's needs before yourself, to kind of lose yourself almost in the process. And to some extent, that's what work asks of us too at times, right? I think there's maybe a room for a changing narrative there, but that really is kind of the traditional one. You can't do both of those things simultaneously. You will fail and disappoint somebody. Usually what ends up happening is you end up disappointing yourself. And so we have to figure out first, who and what am I ambitious for, right? If I am only chasing after the next gold star because it's the next gold star, if I'm chasing after that promotion because that's what I'm supposed to want and I never gave any thought to whether I want it, or maybe because I wanted it, but now I have kids and now with kids I want something else, we're not going to be happy because we're just going to achieve, right? It becomes this kind of hamster wheel of achievement that doesn't feel very good. Maybe it feels good for like a hot second, and then you're just on to the next thing. As opposed to when you are ambitious for something that feels truly aligned, the journey feels good, right? You move from this kind of Sisyphusian task of rolling the hill up the mountain every day to, oh, I'm hiking a mountain and kind of enjoying it. Yeah, it's hard, but I'm enjoying the process and I'm stopping to kind of take in the view as I go.
Okay, so simplistic terms, the journey, not the destination, comparison.
Yeah, but to get there, to get into that spot, right? It's not just a saying. It's not just, oh, be grateful for everything you have. Sure, gratitude has a role, but to get to that point, you have to first look backwards and figure out who am I and what do I want in all of this?
Yeah.
And I think as women, we are so socialized to never ask that question, right? From day one, we are told to be good. We are told to be quiet, not take up space. Don't be too bossy. Don't be too controlling. All of those things. And, you get to adulthood and you've heard that for so long. I think so many women have just completely turned off access to what it is they want. Like, I used to have trouble saying what I wanted for dinner, let alone what I want out of my life. And it feels so big and impossible. You almost have to like start exercising that want muscle to be able to access those bigger questions.
Yeah, you're speaking to my soul right now. So so I want to make it clear for the listeners. So you threw out the phrase ambitious identity paradox. Let's be
Yes.
clear. What is the ambitious identity paradox?
Yeah. So it's a term that I developed, and again, it's that idea that you're going after the wrong thing, that the pursuit of external standards somewhere and a relentless kind of drive for perfection and people pleasing have just completely overshadowed your true vision and values and your true self. And that becomes the thing that gets in your way, that prevents you from achieving whatever it is that you're desiring. All of the stuff that you're chasing after is maybe based on cultural values, based on what your parents wanted for you. It might be based on what you have been kind of trained to want, right? Like every time you get the A, it feels good, so you want another A, but maybe you don't actually care about this stuff anymore. And so this paradox is when you have two things that can't exist at the same time, your fulfillment and the fulfillment of these external things. And you keep chasing these external things and getting more and more out of touch with yourself and maybe feeling more unhappy or numb or checked out. And so the kind of cure for that is to stop chasing those things. Not entirely. It's not don't be ambitious. It's not don't want things. It is take a moment, evaluate your own values, what you want, get clear on what all the other voices are saying, and separate those that don't fit from what you actually want. Then you go after that, right? I think sometimes, especially for millennial moms, and I'm kind of one of those folks on the cusp, the geriatric millennial / Xer. I had a working mom. She was a doctor. She had 4 kids. She had an ambitious career and a family. And I looked at her and said, "Oh, that looks doable. I'll try that." But I think, those of us that were raised in this generation, it was kind of like girls can do anything. Except then it's real disappointing to find out that we'll tell you that, but the world is not actually set up for that to happen. And, newsflash, it's real hard to do all of the things. And so it is this disappointment of, I was told I could do anything. I'm supposed to do everything. There's a lot of pressure that comes with that. What if I actually don't want to do it all? What if my ambition is to be home with my children more? That's great, but maybe I don't feel like that's okay. What if my ambition is to be in the C-suite and, have a big career, but also have a family, and I need to then call in a lot of help? Let's normalize that. That's also an okay choice. I think we don't necessarily realize what the possible outcomes are. And that's what I'm trying to change, to say, like, let's look around and think about what you want and design a life that fits for you, that fits your own personal ambition, as opposed to, either drop out of the workforce entirely or kind of go in a Sheryl Sandberg lean in direction.
Yeah.
Those are 2 possible options of many.
Right. In your conversations with the moms that you work with, are there common examples of or kind of flags that you hear come up that cue you into thinking, we got to talk about, your goals here and your values here? Like, I get the question I'm kind of getting at is like, what might they describe it feels like that it's something's not right here?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I would say in my list that I'll generate here for you, probably 90% of working mothers have felt at some point, because I think it's actually incredibly common. The a big one is I miss my old self, or I don't feel like myself, or I don't know who I am anymore. Like that kind of, there's an awareness in that of that disconnection from self. Probably the most common thing I hear is I'm completely overwhelmed. I don't know how to get everything done, and I am now, essentially like, well, maybe I should get up at 4 a.m. Maybe that's the life hack I'm missing, as opposed to recognizing, no, we have to actually shift the to-do list, not just find more time in your day. This is not a productivity exercise. And kind of relatedly, a sense of failure. I'm a bad mom, I'm a bad employee, I'm a bad whatever, fill in the blank, because I am failing across the board. Another one is feeling really alone and isolated with it, right? Not only disconnected from ourselves, but disconnected from other moms, disconnected from other people, from friends, from any sort of relationship. And then the last one, which I think is a common one, is just this sense of like, I'm not happy and I don't know why, right? Of like, I wanted this, I wanted the job and I wanted the kids, or I thought I did, and now I have them. Why am I not just like blissful all the time? And I think a lot of times when that's the presenting kind of piece, there's a lot of guilt and shame that show up too. Like, I'm not supposed to feel that way. If I wanted kids and I recognize I'm lucky to have them, and oh, my friend struggled, or maybe I struggled with fertility issues, and I'm still not happy, what is wrong with me? And the answer is actually nothing's wrong with you. We just need to help reconnect you to yourself, right? Like that good internal guiding sense of self that's kind of gotten covered over by a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I can relate to a lot of those items that you just listed. How do you help your moms take a first step to analyze what may need to change?
Yeah, I mean, the very, very first step I ever take with someone, whether it is in like a group program that I'm running or as a therapy client, is just a lot of like validation. You are not alone, right? I listed those 5 things because I hear in the 20 years that I've been practicing, I hear this stuff a lot, and I don't say that to minimize it. I say that to help moms understand that like this is not a you problem. This is a systemic issue. But there are things that you can do, right? So you are not alone, and there is hope. And overall, the process is one of starting with kind of a silly analogy, but like a little closet decluttering, right? Like you can kind of visualize. I'm making this up as I go. Going into your closet and like trying literally everything on. Does this fit? Do I like it? Does it fit? Is it comfortable? Would I wear it? Right? And so, of all of these identity pieces that you're chasing after, all of the things that you're trying to do, does it fit? Is it relevant to my current life? Do I even like it? Do I like the way it looks? Right? Do I like the way it feels? Because I think, to further analogy, what's happening is, maybe I had a kid and my identity's upside down and my body's certainly not the same way it is, and I'm like squeezing into, a suit that's not the right size, that's 3 seasons out of date, and I hate it and I'm uncomfortable, and I go to work anyway and I'm wondering why I feel uncomfortable all day. Well, it's because I'm wearing something that isn't me. It doesn't fit. I don't, all of these things are wrong, and I'm not recognizing that. And so we kind of got to figure out, okay, where did all those items of clothing essentially come from? Was that Aunt Susan's comment? Was that your mom's message? Was that school? Was that Instagram? Let's put those things in boxes. And then from the quieter space with that noise kind of contained, let's start doing the work around what do you value? What do you want? Where are some of the breadcrumbs of joy that we can kind of follow to a life that fits better? And then there's a lot of practicing of skills around how to do that and how to set boundaries and ask for help and all of that stuff that comes into play too.
Yeah. Yeah, super wonderful metaphor. Kind of a side note, because I fully understand that that was a metaphor, but postpartum, I found myself literally struggling with my clothes in terms of my identity, feeling like, I always loved fashion. I'm by no means like, don't ask me about fashion, but I always just love shopping and finding good deals. And then when I was postpartum, I felt like I had to find like my new mom outfits, like what was comfortable on my new
Yeah.
body and what felt like me, because I feel like my clothes are what make me feel good, and if I feel good in my day, then I'm like off to a great start. And so I get that that was a metaphor, but I also feel like I tell my mom friends like sometimes you need to go on that shop and splurge and feel like you're comfortable and who you are now, and sometimes that starts with just like feeling good with what you wear. And so that was like a postpartum thing for me.
No, but I think it's totally true, right? And I think I think a lot of women go through that, and a lot of us, I know, I just kind of, with my first, especially, was like, I just need to get back into those old clothes because I didn't want to spend the money, I didn't want to take the
Hmm.
time, blah blah blah. And it wasn't until I had my second where I was like, I'm gonna just need to buy new clothes here because that's actually going to be the thing that makes my life easier. Ironically, I would also say the second is when I left kind of my corporate job and went out on my own. So there was an identity shift in multiple ways there. But it is that process of saying, my life will be easier overall if I take the time to, in this case, go to the mall and buy some new
Hmm.
clothes, right?
Yeah,
If I take the time to fit my current self and my current life and appreciate that, right? Like
yeah,
appreciate those changes to my body, and what got me there, and see
yeah,
those as maybe valuable as opposed to flaws or
totally.
just hardships.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back to the ambitious identity paradox. I just love this concept. And so I want to ask you, um, Moms with Benefits, we take our passion is financial stability for motherhood, and that can mean a lot of different things. We talk to a lot of moms who are navigating their leave journey, and it is exceptionally rare that the balance of income or lack thereof versus some sort of time off um, is not part of that conversation, right? Like there's a financial penalty, there's a financial impact to motherhood. And so I can imagine, and we've heard from a lot of moms that are very ambitious. They love their financial independence. They love that they're going to be able to create generational wealth. And so, how does the financial goals impact the conversations that you've had related to the this ambitious identity paradox, if that's a fair question to ask you?
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things, right? Because if your goal, if you decide that what is most aligned with you is to just kind of keep straight shooting up the ladder, the that's great. There's still a financial impact on a corporate level, but I think maybe what you're getting at more is like, what if you choose to take a pause or roll it back a bit, right?
Yeah, like a lot of our listeners are the breadwinners of their
Right,
family. Yeah.
right. And so I think in there, my advice is a little bit play the long game and communication, right? I know when I chose to step back, there was no language around a pause at the time. My second
Mhm.
is now, of my four, my second is 13. And so this was 13 years ago. And I had no peers that were doing it. It was not a thing. People were either at home or they were working. There was no like gray area. And I think, at the time it felt like, should I even be working part time? I'm starting a new company. Half my almost my entire salary is going towards childcare. Is this worth it? And I will credit my husband, who was like, this is not about this pause or this year. This is about the longevity of your career over time. And you will have, like, that income and experience right now matters. And he also was really good about saying the childcare is not your budget. That is our budget, right? That is not how this works, essentially. And again, I thought of myself as like a feminist. I had this working mom, and I still had these mental blocks that, oh, I'm choosing to work or not work, and so childcare is out of my income, which is like ludicrous, of course, but that's the mental space that I was in. And he was the one that was kind of really able to pull me out of it. I think we all want to save and invest, but you have to do it in a way that is sustainable financially, yes, and from our mental health. Right. And so if you push and never take a break, you're not even going to be able to enjoy that wealth you've accumulated down the road, because you're going to be miserable, or you're going to burn out and actually burn through any reserve because of treatment or pause that you need at that point. And so it is much better to take that time for you, whether that is, I've got clients that take regular days off while their child is in daycare so that they can have a day for them, or who take yearly vacations by themselves, or who hire any number of people to help. And yes, that is a financial investment, but that allows them, again, to circle back to the idea of enjoying the journey, it's what allows them to be present and show up the way they want to at work and at home.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. The long game. That was my main takeaway, is the long game. And you have to, if you're having chronic stress every day because you're going and going and going, you're going to burn yourself out. And that has, the health complications from chronic stress. So really interesting. All right. So another question for you. Are there, myths or misconceptions about balance that set working parents up for failure kind of out of the gate?
I think a lot of people have made some noise about like work-life balance should be work-life integration and how you blend the two. And I think that's important, but I think in some ways we're getting into semantics and missing the point. And the point is that there is no magical state. There's no state of perfect integration. There's no state of balance. If you think about what you're doing when you're balancing, right? Like just literally if you're, listening at home and not walking the dog or driving and you stand on one foot, just notice, right? You are actually making all sorts of tiny micro movements all the time. You are not rigid. And in fact, if you try to be rigid, you are more likely to lose your balance. And that's what balance is. It's a bit of a dance over time. And so my balance from one week to another might look different, and certainly one season to another. And it doesn't have to mean that when my kids are little, I am not working, and then when they get bigger, I am. That's not prescriptive either, right? It's more like there are going to be times when I feel called and pulled and needed more in one space, and there's going to be times when the opposite is true. And overall, that is going to balance out. Right. And so if I've got a, bunch of sick kids, it's winter, if my kids are in daycare and I miss a ton of work and it's really challenging and I'm at home more, okay, but maybe I also know that at some point I'm going to lean in a bit more to work and push there when my kids are healthier and are in daycare or whatever, right? And then again, that's going to look different in different iterations as they get older too. It's not an ending process. I can tell you with teenagers, it doesn't mean that they don't need you anymore. They need you in equally unpredictable ways. It's just that they don't need you when they have a cold to stay home with them anymore. So it's not like you're ever done with that process of figuring out what is balance.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting concept too, and ties back to it is the long game. You need to be, the healthiest mentally, physically kind of mom you can be for you to be able to support your family through the different seasons of life. And I think one of the most understated, I don't know if it's a skill or if it's a learned behavior, but resiliency and like the ability to adapt to change, right? Like that's I think applicable in these scenarios.
Yeah, completely, right? It's like that ability to have some give in the system, some slack in the system. That's the word I'm looking for. So that when something happens, you can adjust.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to share on this concept of the ambitious identity paradox before we sign off here?
No, just that, if people want to hear more about it, I have set myself the lofty goal of doing some more writing on the topic so they can follow me. I'm on LinkedIn at Dr. Ann Welsh. I'm also on Instagram at dr.welsh.coaching. And people can also learn more. My website is Dr. Ann Welsh, but I've also at least bought the naming rights to ambitiousidentityparadox.com, and that'll also take you to my website. So,
Congratulations. It's always so exciting when you buy the domain and you're ready
yes,
to launch something new. That's
do something
awesome.
with it. Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for
of
joining us.
course. Thank you so much for having me.